This is the Well Founder Podcast.
Okay, so welcome to the show, Alan. It's a pleasure having you on today.
Thank you so much for having me on, Zavi. Good to talk again.
Yeah, it is. It's been a while, since we talked the first time, and it's good meeting you again, and you agreeing to come on again. That is, I'm so excited about that.
It was 2018, I think, right? So 5 years ago in Future of SaaS. So we're both still in SaaS, which I think is a good thing, Zavi, right?
I agree. I couldn't agree more. That business model has so much potential, even with the whole recession and everything. SaaS is still doing very well. So
it's a great model. I think and we'll talk about it on the podcast, Zavi. I think that the challenge is now it's getting so attractive that everybody wants a piece of it. So it's getting very competitive. So I think that's the interesting challenge we all face.
That is so true. And since we last talked, you're now a co-founder of you. I mean, when we talked, you were like a marketing consultant for SaaS companies, and now you're a co-founder. And we're going to talk about all of that because it's super exciting. But before we do, could you tell our viewers a little bit about you and what you do basically?
Yeah, so I'm based in London. I'm from Ireland originally. And to your point, I really like SaaS. I've been in SaaS since there was 56K dial-up. I don't think you might remember that, Sam. But, at one point, software was sold through retail stores or through disks being loaded onto computers. So I've been in SaaS since the internet was fast enough to deliver software through a browser. I'm now a co-founder and CEO of Contento, which is a content management system for SaaS companies, not surprisingly. And to your point, before that, I spent a number of years working as a consultant, predominantly a fractional marketing consultant. So very much working with VC-backed B2B SaaS companies that probably didn't have the budget or resources to hire a full-time chief marketing officer, but they needed some strategic input into the function. So I was doing that probably for 7 or 8 years till I kind of fully transitioned into this new role.
That is so cool, man. That's so cool. How is it going though with the content? I want to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we're actually a content management system. So we're not a service. We're the software that runs your website. So I guess where we're coming from, Zavi, is, WordPress is 20 years old, right? And it was built for a different era and for a different use case and for a different context. And, it's now beginning to show its age a little bit. And there will always be staunch defenders of WordPress, right? Because it's such a huge ecosystem. But, there's room for other types of content management systems. And there's a new technology that's sort of emerging. Well, it's probably 7 or 8 years old, but it's still very much in the early stages, which is called a headless content management system, which is a kind of unusual name. But that's the category we sit in. And what it means is just a different way to build and manage your website, whereby with the likes of traditional systems, everything's jumbled together. With headless, there's a clear separation between the front end and the back end. I'm getting a little bit technical, Zavi, I suspect, but it's just a new way of building websites that is kind of beginning to take off. And we're coming in with a solution that's very focused on a specific audience, which is B2B SaaS and technology companies.
I like that because I notice there's some commonality in terms of how SaaS tend to look. Their website, I really like some of their designs. I've always wondered what kind of a content management system they use in terms. I know it's definitely not WordPress, but there's something that all of them use. Is that, are you guys gonna compete with who's your biggest competitor? I guess
that's exactly, you've nailed it, right? So Webflow is often a solution that people use in technology companies, which kind of the next evolution up from WordPress.
Okay.
But then some of the leading ones have moved to this category called headless, right? So what you get with it is, it's not a templated look and feel. It's a decoupling of the front and the back end. So your front end designers can build a beautiful site however way they want to do it, using whatever coding, whatever frameworks, whatever solutions. It's almost like Lego pieces that you're putting together using APIs. So you're absolutely right. The goal of a headless is you get a beautifully designed site, but it is really, really fast. So again, if speed and performance are kind of important, particularly as your traffic grows, if you can get a site under a second, it means that it's very responsive and blazingly quick. And it's very hard to do that on a WordPress or a Webflow or you might get it down to 2 or 3. But that's one of the benefits of headless, is you kind of future-proofing the build in a very scalable and flexible way that, to your point, is probably perfect for growing technology companies. So we're not for your first startup that's just out the door, and it's not a fit for that, right? They're better off on a Squarespace or a Wix or WordPress for a few years, but then once they grow and need a better site that's performant and beautiful looking and set for scaling, then they'll start looking around and say, okay, what's the next, evolution? Webflow would have been one that would have been, often considered a very attractive option, but headless, the category, is now kind of emerging. And we're in that space, right? We're earlier on our journey than some of the others, but we're in that space, and already excited about the sort of ability to really design a system that meets the needs of both developers and marketing people.
Now this is good because of I know I'm gonna own a SaaS at some stage in this life.
Totally.
So, and as you're speaking, I've always wondered, say something like an Asana, you're familiar with this Asana.
Yeah.
Can you use your system to build something like that? Or how does that work? Is yours just to build the front end and the back end, or what? If you
So
could
we're just the back end, right?
Okay.
So we're the bit. So if you think about it, you'll have logged into WordPress or Squarespace maybe at some point to update, your site, right, or someone else's site. So a lot of the traditional models, you can kind of fiddle with the content and the design elements in there. So you can change the colors of buttons, and so you're doing both the design and the content through one single interface. With us, we're just the back end. It's like a content repository which houses all your content and houses all your data. And then there's an API that's used by your designers to pull that content from. So I guess it's almost like a single source of truth, that you've got your content all in one place, easy to use and maintain. So the marketing team, to go full circle, Xavi, they're not really worried about, picking the wrong color buttons or the wrong font or the wrong design on the page. They're really worried about just, can we have an easy interface to manage and update the content? And the front end designers worry about the kind of look and feel. So it's basically it's for powering websites, but it's just the back end, and the back end is where the content is. And it's kind of like, it's back to the specialization, right? We're not jumbling everything together. It's not all in one. It's just the back end. But what I guess the key driver is that it means that the use of APIs and the flexibility means you can then have developers that aren't wedded to a particular template. They're not wedded to a front end. Often the challenges with some of these, Avi, is they can't put in custom code. They're kind of constrained. They're limited to what they can do. Whereas this, it's sort of carte blanche. So that's kind of why it's taking off as a category, particularly for enterprise-grade solutions, where there's either lots of traffic to your website, where your shopping cart needs to load quickly and speed is of the essence, or whether you just want a beautifully designed site that's flexible and scalable, and you can have all the modern toolkits and technologies at play, and it's just bringing them together. So it's a slightly different approach compared to the traditional model. And this is the key point. It's not for everybody, right? This is the key point. I'm still arguing, if you're doing a beauty salon website, you're fine on a WordPress or a Squarespace or a Wix. But it's if you're looking to do the inbound marketing model of a technology company with lots of content, lots of authors, managing funnels, form submissions, SEO, those sorts of websites would benefit from headless, and therefore becomes a realistic option for them. And then with Contento, we're kind of positioning ourselves as the provider that's focused on B2B SaaS and technology sites. So that's how we're sort of differentiating ourselves in the market.
That is so cool. Now, I'm curious though, why this problem? Like, obviously, you got a lot of experience in SaaS, but why this particular problem?
I was a bit like you, Xavi, right? So I was waiting as well for the great idea to come along, and actually, sometimes the pain is right in front of you. So like, I was aware of content management system problems when I was a marketing CMO, because every company that I worked with were B2B SaaS, and there was invariably problems whereby I just constantly hated WordPress. I could search for solutions, and I didn't really. Webflow was the one that was kind of closest to the one that I thought actually is getting in the right direction for SaaS companies. And then one of my co-founders was a CEO of a software company himself and realized that he also bought into this idea for headless, but wasn't very happy with the few options that he provided from the market leaders. So it was a kind of meeting of minds. We thought, look, actually, we think the trend of headless is definitely one that's going to grow. But some of the early kind of companies in there have got certain things that we thought kind of fundamentally wrong. And therefore, we've said, well, look, there's an opportunity to build a distinctive offering catering for a specific niche. So we're not trying to be a horizontal content management system for every industry under the sun, right? So we're not saying we're going to do beauty salons or restaurants or estate agents. That's not what our platform is for. But if you're a technology or B2B SaaS company, that's the world we come from. You've got some requirements that we think we know, and therefore, if we can build a great solution for that audience, it's kind of the one that we're building for.
That is so cool. And that kind of leads me to the topic of today, which is basically how to stand out in a crowded market. I mean, first of all, how old is the company? I'm guessing it's a couple of years old. But...
It's not. It's just in its first year, right? So we're early on the journey. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, congrats on the launch for that. That's so cool. And obviously, we want to talk about how a company like yours can stand out in that market. But obviously, based on your experience and all that, how crowded is that B2B SaaS space?
So kind of answering the crowded bit, B2B SaaS, right? So B2B SaaS is a very broad category, right? So obviously sitting under that is everything from CRMs to accounting software to expense management software to whatever, right? So you can't really look at it on the kind of the complete macro. You almost look at it like on a category by category basis. But the general theme is it's hyper competitive, right? No matter what vertical you look at, there's intense competition. Like you mentioned Asana earlier. So that's in the broad kind of project management space. Well, there's Teamwork, there's Rike, there's Basecamp, there is what is the one? Trello, Monday,
yeah.
And that's only the tip of the iceberg, right? So what's kind of happened structurally, I guess, is a couple of things. So one is the economic models of SaaS, if you get them right, are very attractive, right? So there's been a lot of VC investment going into SaaS, and there's been a lot of hype around SaaS. And, there's a lot of software developers coming out of universities and colleges and self-taught that can kind of code, right? And so there's pressures on that side. And then the cost of entry is probably lower too, Xavi, because, we're a remote first company. We don't have big offices. We don't have any offices, in fact. So your kind of startup costs are very much the salaries of the developers, right? By and large, right? So there's a lot going on. And I guess you can also start kind of understanding the landscape. So you can be a consumer of some of these products, and you'll invariably say, I don't like this about this one, or I think, this one's got a problem. Or what often happens, Avi, is as company mature, they go up market, right? Because the VCs are putting pressure on them to increase their average cart value or their lifetime value. And they often say, look, we don't want to serve the bottom end of the market anymore because it's not making us enough money. And then all of a sudden opportunities appear at the bottom end, right? So I'm giving you a very long-winded answer, I know, but most of them are really competitive. But I think that's the nature of the world now. And the thing that does demonstrate is there is a need, right? You can see that the market is there because of the competition. I think the other way is if you come up with something completely disruptive that has no competition, you almost need to be worried because you're either a genius or the market's too small for others to be attracted to it, or you're too early, or you're going to need deep pockets because you're going to educate people. So I think any entry into the software world is kind of conflicted between, I can't find any competition, but then I need to validate that there is an opportunity, or there is a crowded category. Can we craft a viable strategy to compete in that?
What you said makes so much sense because of this whole podcasting game. I got into a time when it wasn't that popular. This was pre-COVID, and like you said, when I mentioned, especially in the UK, anytime I mentioned podcasting, everybody was looking at me like, what are you talking about? But post-COVID is exploded everywhere. Everybody's now podcasting. Well, you're spot on. When you come in that initially, you have to explain and educate and all that. And if you don't have the resources for that, then that company is going to struggle. So I guess that's something new founders need to keep in mind. But yeah, But sorry, but speaking in terms of competition and market saturation, now what kind of things, like what kind of, I guess, would you say advice would you give to founders when they're developing their SaaS?
Yeah, so ironically, right, there's a famous economics academic, right, by the name of Michael Porter. And he was writing on this very topic back in 1980s. So when I was in business school, you might have heard of Porter's five forces, right? Which was if not, let's put it in the notes afterwards. But he also had this paper largely on the topic of what he called his generic strategies. And the whole thrust of the paper was like how to win in competitive markets, right? So he was thinking about it back in the 80s, right? And, I think his kind of, view on the world is still the same view, right? So he had kind of three generic strategies that he talked about. One was differentiation, one was focus, and one was sort of almost price-led, or, the cost leader of the market, right? So what he was arguing was that if you enter a crowded market, you either got to be the cheapest, so really, really cheap, right? So that you're, and you could do that if you look at the likes of SEMrush and Ahrefs and all these other tools, fully featured. But if you're looking to break into that space, a lot of people won't pay the $100 or $200 a month because they don't have the budget for that. But if you can come in with an offering that's $10 a month, and I think there are, right, I just don't know the names to hand. You're only $10 a month. You don't have all the features of the big guys, but you've got ones that you deem to be the core features. You're going to be very appealing to the SMB market that doesn't want to pay $100 a month, but you're cost led, you're price led, you're kind of making sure that you're the leader in the pricing. Alternatively, you could pick a niche. So you just pick a niche, and that's kind of what we're doing. We're saying we're not going to be doing beauty salon websites or hairdresser websites. We're just going to be doing B2B SaaS. And by picking a niche, you're shrinking your market. So you're saying we're not doing everything. We're going to go really narrow. But the theory is that you can better serve the needs of that market because you're not getting distracted by, requests for features from people that are, not core to your market. And then the third one is a kind of a differentiated approach whereby, you're differentiating on something like service, where you might do, right, we got free support for everybody forever, right? So you might find in some markets, like Ahrefs and SEMrush, right, they don't want people on the phone ringing up constantly, asking how to do this or how to do that, because their pricing model won't support it and their margins are shot. Whereas if you're the guys that say, okay, our market strategy is we are going to let you talk to some of our experts, right? So you're differentiating almost on a feature. So they're the three, that's the theory. And I think that theory is quite right. I think if you're entering a market in software, there are three good ones to kind of think about. And for us, a niche focus, hyper focus on one vertical is the way we've decided to go for it, because we believe that, there's this notion of what's called vertical SaaS, right? So vertical SaaS is that you can now bring out offerings that are for a particular vertical. And ChartMogul recently, which is a well-known SaaS company in Europe, they brought out a CRM, so a customer relationship management tool, just for B2B SaaS. So they're kind of much like we're doing a content management system just for B2B SaaS. You couldn't have done that 5 years ago because the market was just not there. But now you can sort of say, okay, actually, if you go hyper focused on a niche, you can deliver exceptional value to that niche, because in theory, you can better serve that market compared to the others that are more general and more horizontal. That's essentially the playbook. Does that make sense, Avi?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And to me, personally, it makes a lot of sense because my target as well is B2B SaaS, so what you're saying makes a lot of sense. But one of the issues when I was trying to niche down for my own service, I just didn't know how big that market was, or how I felt maybe it's saturated, like everybody. But you saying, these are some ways you can differentiate yourself, maybe by pricing or by feature or by, customer support, just giving me ideas in terms of how I might want to differentiate myself. Very, very interesting. Can I ask though, how's the operations going so far? Like, I'm guessing you're playing the marketing role for Contento.
Yeah, I'm wearing multiple hats, right? So I'm the CEO, right? So the CEO's got a couple of jobs. So hiring is always there, and we've got some great developers working on the teams, Avi. So, But you're right, my background was in marketing, so again, I can lean quite heavily on that. But the CEO role is very different, right? It's much more all-consuming.
Yeah.
It's operations, it's fundraising, it's making sure you don't run out of cash. It's it's setting the vision. So it's a very different type of role, but very exhilarating and one that I'm enjoying immensely. But the startup journey is an interesting one, right? You're always getting new challenges that you didn't envisage or that you didn't expect. So you're constantly sort of under pressure to make fast decisions. Whereas I guess when I was in a marketing capacity, I kind of had the playbook. I'd been doing it for a number of years, so I sort of was more in a comfort zone, whereas this is definitely more of a stretch, but so far so good. We're on a journey, and we're excited about where the future's going.
That's so cool, exciting. That startup stages, early startup stages, is very exciting. And is this self-funded bootstrapping, or have you guys got investors?
No, we're fortunate. So one of the co-founders privately put some cash in, and we've got a couple of other investors that funded it as well. I think it's getting more difficult to bootstrap technology companies. I think I think you could have got away with it 10 years ago. I'm a bit more skeptical about how easy it is. Look, there will always be some examples of bootstrap companies, right? But I think we're building an enterprise grade solution, right? So it will be very hard. You can obviously build a more basic app on a bootstrap, but I think to get an enterprise application with all the competition, with the need to hire great talent, I think it's just getting more and more difficult. So I do think that you do need investment, and actually it's a good kind of topic to touch on for a second. So one of the challenges historically with, let's say, European businesses was, particularly B2B SaaS ones, was they didn't raise enough cash compared to their American counterparts. So that bit is still kind of one of the big differentials. If you were to raise a seed or a Series A in the US for B2B SaaS, you tend to get much bigger check sizes, which means you can have a longer runway. It means you don't have to fundraise so quickly after the initial raise. It means you can hire better people. So that gap still remains. And I think that's one that will hopefully close over time, because I go back to my key point is that we're now in a world of intense competition, and you do have to save cash for sales and marketing, which is getting more expensive and more challenging. And therefore, you could probably bootstrap a build, but I think particularly if one of you was a developer, right? But I think, it's going to be fewer and fewer cases of people that are bootstrapped in B2B SaaS getting to the stage of an exit, I think. I'd love to be proven wrong on it, but that's just my sense.
No, I think you're spot on with that. I was chatting earlier to some founders. They're in the pharmaceutical space, B2B. They were able to raise $7 million on us. I'm looking at these guys from university, but they're Americans as well. So I was thinking, their solution must really be there must be some serious potential, because what they're doing is very, very niche, very, very niche for pharmaceuticals. So that they were able to raise that amount was kind of like eye-opening, or
Yeah, I think look, part of it is going back to the kind of, it's just a slightly more mature ecosystem. That's not being critical of European founders, but if you've got a lot deeper pockets and more experience, you probably recognize that from your own portfolio companies, particularly in the kind of times when there's difficult environments, that like what you don't really want to be doing is having down rounds, or you don't want people running out of money prematurely, and then having to do bridging funding. And so there's a whole mix of stuff going on. So I think that's another reason that if you are, an early stage investor, the check size just have to be that little bit bigger, because otherwise you're not giving the company the the opportunity to get to the major milestones they need. And like there could be FDA approval needed with pharmaceuticals, which they might know from the portfolio companies that actually it takes 3 to 5 years for FDA approval. I'm just making it up, I don't know. But if it does, there's no point writing a small check and finding that they make good progress, but that they then need to go raise cash because they're just not getting far along. So I think that's probably what's going on there.
Crazy, very exciting. I know definitely I'm gonna have a SaaS one day, and that's one of the reasons I started this podcast, because of I want to talk to more experienced founders, experts like you, and hopefully investors as well, like, to see what the mind, or I don't know, how they think and all that stuff in the SaaS space. But speaking of this whole market saturation thing and the competing, yeah, I was just thinking, say a company, a SaaS company, or a founder, he's decided to choose one of those three options you gave him. So maybe pricing, servicing, or feature. Would you say he should? How do I put it? Would you say he should steal customers from, or do you go after people that are not using your product already? Like, what would be a better strategy if that
Yeah,
makes sense?
yeah, it does. So like you're either looking for new, what they'd say in the VC terms, you're either looking for new to category, so people that are new to the category that don't have an existing solution, or
Okay.
switchers. So switchers might be people that are moving from one provider to another.
Okay.
And the motivations for switching are often, they could be cost or pricing, right? So for example, I know in the headless CMS space, one or two of the major players have what I'd call a very aggressive pricing schedule, right? So they kind of go from £100 or $100 or €100 a month to €1,000 a month if you hit some limit that you may not even have known about, right? So that's a kind of a trigger point in some instances. Some people build their site, they're running it, and all of a sudden the check goes from 100 to 1,000, right? And it's like, wow, okay, I gotta switch, right? So for us, we're always going to be a switcher play. Well, yeah, predominantly a switcher play because we're not a good fit for your very first website. So like if you're building your very first website, I'd recommend a Wix or Squarespace, maybe even a WordPress, even though I'm not a huge fan of WordPress. But so we're always going to be someone that you would switch to. But I think the path for us would then be twofold. It's those that are on a traditional or legacy system like WordPress, and I think there's very strong grounds for growing technology companies to move off WordPress. I mean, there's huge amount of issues with it, and then of course there's others that would be on, competitors of ours in the headless space that are feeling that they need to move. And I guess two or three of the main reasons to move will be price gouging, which there's evidence of, usability on the platform. So one of the things we're focused hard on, Xavi, is a lot of the platforms are very developer centric. They're very technical, and therefore they're not easy for marketing to use and maintain. So that's a key differentiator that we're focused on. So again, that will be the basis for people to switch. And third will be service potentially, whereby, as these companies mature, the lower packages, they just don't want people on phone calls, so they kind of put you on chats or get the community to solve your problem, where again, we can come in and, speak to people and sort of help on an individual basis, which we probably couldn't do if we were at Series D level, but when you're early stage, you can. So these are some of the things to think about.
I like that. I like that. That actually it shows you the real potential of your business. In terms of when you start thinking how big the market is. Like for a company like yours, like you said, those that are maybe struggling with the £1,000 a month, and maybe you're offering the same or similar for 500 a month. That makes good business sense now. For them to switch now. So that is very, very interesting. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, and the funny thing, Xavi, look, it's often an emotional issue, right? Because like these are business customers, so in theory, yeah, an extra few thousand a year in many instances isn't going to make a huge difference. But there's kind of almost an emotive factor that if, we've been through in life, if someone starts jacking up the price of a service, right, we all resist, right?
Yeah.
Particularly if it's kind of a disproportionate jump, right? It's one thing to have a 20% increase, but when there's a huge leap, your natural tendency, whether it's your money or whether it's your company's money, is to push back. And if there's not much ground in terms of giving, there's a kind of a classic case of, okay, well, then we go look for alternatives. So, but like all things, it's a very competitive space. But going back to my point, most categories now are getting crowded. So much like you have to carve out a little niche, and you've got to carve out a business in competition. You don't give up. You don't kind of not go in because you think it's competitive. You just got to go in eyes wide open and be comfortable that it is competitive. But then, having this intellectual kind of rigor around where you think you can best position. And we touched on Michael Porter earlier, but the other person that's kind of really interesting in this stuff is April Dunford. who's written a book on positioning. It's a different book to Porter and the academic stuff, but it is very much talking about SaaS and technology companies and how you position yourself relative to the competition so that the buyer really understands the value you bring and how you differentiate yourself from these other providers.
Makes a lot of sense. Positioning is something that I am such a big fan of. Like, I think it's so important when you're trying to break into a market or anything. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But speaking, let's say a founder that fits that category, you know, their bill has gone up to $1,000 all of a sudden, and is maybe watching this. How easy would it be to switch from their current provider to, say, a company like yours?
Yeah, look, again, you've hit the nail on the head. The kind of migration will be varied depending on the complexity of the website, right? So it won't be seamless. There's no kind of click a button now and magically you can switch from one provider to the other. There's always going to be lots of documentation that helps. But early stage companies like ourselves will often offer support, you know, on very attractive rates, kind of to help with the migration. But yeah, let's don't be under no illusions. Once you're changing your content management system, it's not a frictionless transaction, right? It is a kind of a big deal, but you know, sometimes, you know, and this is the argument we would make, that the cost is worth it. So like going back to WordPress for a second, you know, if your site is, no matter what you do, you know, difficult to maintain, you know, very slow because of bloat. You have a developer on a retainer that you have to pay $1,000 a month to keep them just so it doesn't go down. You're worried about, you know, security vulnerabilities with some of the plugins that you've no idea what they are. You're afraid of breaking things. Like that's the kind of context sometimes people face. So, you know, they don't want to stay on that world. They know that they can't, continue. So it becomes a project like any other project, and this is where agencies can come in and help, right? So often you bring in an agency because, you know, there's a number of things to any migrations, Avi. It's not just the new look and feel or the new content management system. You want to make sure that SEO isn't impacted negatively because of the switch. So it's not your point is it's not a straightforward thing, but normally the push and pull elements are so strong that in certain use cases it becomes a very viable option. And then the other thing is, like, providers like us are always trying to reduce the migration costs, right, and the switching costs. So we're aware of this issue and we're doing everything we can to kind of reduce the friction, because you know that's the way it is, right? You got to make it easy for people to buy what you offer, because if you don't, you're adding an extra layer of complexity which you could do well without.
I like that. I like that. It helps. And that is where another area you guys stand out, you know, could help them with the migration, you know, and make their life less difficult or make it easier for them to switch. That is brilliant. And then this has been an awesome chat. You've really given me in particular an insight into standing out and competing, because I'm also trying to get, you know, into that B2B SaaS world. And you've given us these 3 excellent ways to do it. If you could leave our viewers with one final tip, what would that be?
Xavi, you've put me on the spot. I think it is just, you know, if you are contemplating doing a startup, you kind of have to take the step, right? It's almost like you could over rationalize it. And of course, you know, you might be used to a career or a job or a consultancy where things are a little bit more predictable and certain, and you know the tasks that you need to do on a daily basis, and you've got a little bit more confidence around predicting the next few months. Startups are inherently volatile, and you know, you can't really overthink it. So I think that's the kind of message: just go and jump, and then, you know, figure it out from there, because you're always going to get stuff coming at you that you would just never could have contemplated or envisaged or planned. So I think taking the first step and just going there is the best thing to do.
Couldn't agree more. I'll add on to that. Don't quit your day job. You know, while you're at it, not yet anyway, until.
Yeah, look, it's a good point, right? If you could do some initial work, you know, that keeps some income coming in a couple of days so that you can start speccing things out. And look, you do need a tech co-founder, right? Like if you're a business person or sales or marketing or operations, you need a tech co-founder, right? You can't really do tech startups without a co-founder that's a really perfect kind of complement your skill set. So that's another piece of advice.
Alan, thank you so much for that. That is wonderful advice. Yeah. If any of our viewers would like to learn more about you, check out more content, what's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of places. Contento.io is one. Alan Gleeson, if you Google me, Gleeson, you'll find my LinkedIn profile, or you'll find me on Twitter. And feel free to reach out.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Alan. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on today.
Thank you, Zavi. Listen, great to connect with you again after all these years. Thanks for having me on.